He's gonna get guns.
All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our regular monthly meeting for June the 15th, 2023. Call the meeting to order. I'll now ask for a motion to make Josie Noseworthy acting town clerk for this meeting.
So moved.
Second. Okay, it's moved by Deputy Mayor Eric Nippert, second by Councillor Earl Barrett. Any further questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now, a motion to adopt May 18th, 2023 council meeting agenda or minutes, sorry.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Earl Barrett,
Second.
seconded by Councillor Ryan House. Sorry, lost my train of thought there.
Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now I have a motion to adopt our June 15th, 2023 council meeting agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Rick Nippert, second by Councillor Vince McGraw. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We'll now move on to our financial, so I'll turn it over to Councillor Barrett.
I'd like to make a motion that our accounts payable in the amount of $86,459.77 be approved.
Okay, you heard the motion as read by Councillor Barrett. Any discussion on that? Anyone have any questions or concerns about the invoices? Okay, all in favor? Oh, sorry, seconder. Seconder?
Second.
Second by Councillor Brian House. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. New business. The Making Lemonade with Youth Ventures. There was a letter sent in from the Youth Ventures program from Emma Butler. And they have summer students that go out during the summer and have little small businesses in the community. They're asking the town of Kippens that if any businesses are set up here in the town, that will waive any permit fees, business fees and things like that for us. You know, it's a good venture for the kids, you know, it teaches them a lot. And I have no issue personally with waiving any fees. The only thing is if it comes to public health issues, then they'll have to deal with that with the public health department.
Paul, would we have the permits go through normal process, just waive the fee?
Yes.
I think that would be important too.
Yeah.
They will
Now, you still have to follow
process.
it, yes, but
Yeah,
we just won't bother with charging
So
them
we'll
any
say
fees.
that the fees would waive.
But like I said, anything when it comes to public health, well, they have to deal with that with the public health department to make sure that what they're doing is correct and proper, so.
I move that we waive the fees in the interest of assisting our young people.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. You heard, second by Vince McGraw. Any further discussion?
And we will make stipulation that we'll follow the normal process with permits, just the waiving of the fees.
Just the
I
waiving
think
of
that's
fees.
important
Yeah.
for all business.
Yeah. Okay.
All
All right. Yeah. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now we're gonna move on to permits.
Okay,
And
we
I'll
had
turn
a,
it over to Councillor House.
yeah, we had a number of permits, bear with me as I try and go through them in order that they're on the agenda.
Mhm.
First one was a permit, to build a shed at, 272 Kippens Road. We had looked at the permit and it adheres to all of our guidelines in terms of easements and distances from property lines and so on. So I recommend that we approve the permit for the shed at 272 Kippens Road.
Okay. We heard the motion brought forward by Councillor House, as seconder. Second by Councillor Vince McGraw. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, the next one is a permit for building a covered deck on the front of the house at 25 Lakeview Drive. And again, we saw no issues with that in terms of the location of the deck, the covered deck and so on. So I would recommend approval of a permit to build a covered deck at 25 Lake.
Hey, Brian, or Councillor House, sorry, my apologies. Saying a covered deck at the front of the house. So is that just a walkway from the house, or is there an actual deck, or?
Porch or top wall, or just a roof.
So the house in question, I think, already has a peak covering over the front of a small deck, right? So is this an extension to that, or is it, we're going to fully enclose that particular?
Okay, we'll bring our acting town clerk in on it. Josie?
That's just the roof put on the actual deck.
Yeah.
No
Covered deck,
walls,
front entrance.
There's a roof already existing, right?
but it, from what I understand, that's what they wanted the permit for, was that it, has it been there all along? I don't know. My understanding is new. That is what the permit is for. What's the date of that permit? Brian?
May 18th. So that's one that was approved by the committee.
Yeah.
Back in May. So that's probably what you see there, the cover, because we did approve the permit on May the 18th.
Okay, just wanted to make sure, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, you heard the permit brought forward by Councillor House. We have a seconder.
So
Second by Deputy Mayor Eric Nipper. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Next, we have a request for an extension to patio at 10 Crimson Avenue. They're looking at, the existing patio is 16 by 20. And this would be a further 14 by 16 extension. It's at ground level, and it's fine in terms of its location on the person's property. So I would recommend approval of that.
Okay, you heard the motion brought forward. Seconder, second by Councillor McGraw. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Bit late on that one.
Next, we have a request to build a garage at 12 Driftwood Drive and 34 Orchard Lane.
But same person. Location.
No,
No. That's the way it's written there, but it's actually at 12 Driftwood Drive. And in terms of the location of the garage, it's far enough away from the property line. They've given us a plot plan and we saw nothing that would be against our regulations. So we recommended approval of the permit to build that garage.
Okay. You heard the request for the permit. Seconder, second by Councillor Earl Barrett. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, next we have a request to build a shed at 14 Millbrook Lane.
Is
Did you,
34 Orchard Lane out of the question?
Yeah, 34 Orchard was,
Okay.
I'm not sure what that was.
that's a request to build a garage at 12 Driftwood Drive and also a garage at 34 Orchard Lane. They're just grouped together because they both want a garage built. So there's two permits.
Okay, two separate people.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I have the one here, maybe I'll back up, and there is one here. It's from a different applicant, but it is a garage at 34 Orchard. It's a 24 by 28 garage, detached garage. They've given us a drawing of where it's proposed. It's not within any encroachment on the edges of the property, and it looked fine as far as placement. So we recommended approval of the garage at 34 Orchard Lane.
Okay, so you heard the request for the approval for 34 Orchard. Have a seconder. Second by Councillor McGraw. Any further discussion? All in favor?
I'm too tired.
We got a number of
Motion
these.
carried.
Okay, I'll continue on with the one for 14 Millbrook Lane.
Yep.
This is just an 8-foot by 8-foot. We call it a shed or, yeah, a shed at 14 Millbrook Lane. Same thing, it's where we would have to have it placed under our regulations in terms of proximity to border lines and so on. So we saw no difficulty with it, and they've given us the required drawings and so on. So we do recommend approval of this shed at 14 Millbrook Lane.
Okay, heard the request for the approval. Second by Deputy Mayor Eric Nippert. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, next one we have is a request for a duplex housing unit at 269 Kippens Road. We've received the required information in terms of the approval for septic for the duplexes on that property. The applicant has made it clear that they have the required 30,000 square feet for the two septic fields for the two separate units in the duplex.
Okay.
And they've received that approval. So we were recommending approval of the permit to build that duplex at 269 Kippens Road.
Okay, you heard the motion brought forward by Councillor House. Do we have a seconder? Second by Councillor Vince McGraw. Any further discussion on that permit?
Well, I'm just wondering, what transparency, he's talking about putting a duplex unit on a very large piece of property. What's his plans for future?
Yeah, the only thing we were told was that this was going to be a model home, but we are only approving a permit to build one duplex unit with two separate sewer systems. And the 30,000 square feet that the property is, Councillor Barrett, is what will be required in order to have a septic field for each of those individual units.
So if there's any future development, you would have to apply for individual permits.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But we are recommending approval of this one, and we feel that he's given us all the required information that we had asked for.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, we have a request for a sawmill. This is the small backyard mill for personal use. We've done a number of these.
Yep.
This one happens to be at 255 Kippens Road. So as with the past ones, we are recommending approval with some pretty strict guidelines that dictate when these mills can be used. I think the Forestry Department, I believe.
Forestry, they approved the permit for them to have it in the community, then the forestry just steps in, and then they have to follow all the guidelines from the Department of Forestry.
You site inspection.
And they do a site
Yes, they
inspection from forestry as well. So we saw no reason that we would not approve this. We've approved a number of others, and to date, they've not been a problem. So I'm recommending the approval of this 255 Kippens Road sawmill.
Okay. You heard brought forward by Councillor House, second by Councillor O'Barrett. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
And I think the last permit we have for today is a request to build a house at 47 Orchard Lane. And we've got the required drawings and information on the plan. Is there anything else that we need to? There's a contractor that's building the home. We have everything there as far as the dock plan. We see, so we're recommending approval of the permit to build that house at 47 Orchard Lane, subject approvals. Yep, septic approval is there and everything is there. The drawings.
Okay, so you heard the motion brought forward by Councillor House. Do I have a seconder? Second by Deputy Mayor Eric Nipper. Any further discussion on that permit? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now we're going to move on to our committee reports, and I'll start here on my left with Deputy Mayor Nipper.
As of right now, nothing to report. Our last big activity with the Human Resources Committee was to do 2 hires of our town clerk and our chief administrative officer. We were successful in finding 2 individuals who are now gainfully employed with us and are very, very welcome. And other than that, nothing else to report on that.
I'm gonna gander to it, couple days.
What to do?
Hey, Councillor House.
From the planning and development, as you can see, we were fairly busy with the number of permits, and there's been a fair amount of activity with that, because it's required a fair amount of clarification.
Yes.
Glad to say that we've been able to enlist our new chief administrative officer in that process along with the other town staff. And we'll continue to work on them diligently.
Okay, Councillor McGraw.
No reports right now. The only thing I like to mention is I like to get, if we can get the chief, me, you to get together. We were talking about one in paper about looking at something to adequately fill their needs. And take it off their hands, which is really not for them.
Yep.
So probably the next couple of weeks, something like that, we see if we can get something started anyway.
All right,
I'll appreciate that.
happy. Okay, thank you, Councillor McGraw. Councillor Barry.
We had a meeting with the maintenance staff on June 13th and discussed a number of issues pertaining to maintenance within the town. We've identified areas of streets that need touch up paving, streets that may need to be totally repaved. Town manager is getting quotations on that. He's going to bring it forward to council once he gets them for our review. We went over the water system and right now we're having a little extra use or usage, I should say, of well number 4 because of Stephenville tying in. And that well is working fine. But well number 3 requires some maintenance. And we're waiting to get the contractor in to have a look at it and find out exactly what needs to be done. The main water tank also needs to be cleaned, but once again, it's a specialized job and we gotta wait until we get the contractor in and have a look at that.
So, if I could, we approved some funding last meeting.
Yeah.
For maintenance of, we made any movement on
Oh, replacement, was it?
that. Well, it was a litany of items that they had put forward as a proposed
Yes.
maintenance of our complete water system. I'm just wondering if we moved any further.
My understanding is that they're waiting to get the contractor in.
Oh, okay.
It's obvious that there's so very few people who do this type of work.
Right.
And he's being kept busy. He knows we want him. He knows we have a need there. And I was saying that if it was an emergency, yes, we'd be here tomorrow, but it's not an emergency.
Okay.
We also need some maintenance done in the chlorine shed. There's some regulators there that need to be overhauled or replaced. And as I was saying, the main water tank itself needs to be cleaned out. But I believe the chap that does that comes in from Nova Scotia. So once he's in town, or once he's in the province, yes, we'll get work done.
Doctors will be happy to follow up on that with that individual and just see if we can get a possible timeline.
There's a problem with being able to communicate with our system here. In that, in order to find out if there's a alarm goes off, in order to find out what the problem is, the staff have to come down here to the building and find out. Whereas before they could look it up on their cell phone. So we're gonna have a look to see if we can reinstate that system. I have no idea what's required until we get somebody with the technical knowledge to have a look at it. We discussed our parks and playgrounds, and there are some low spots in the playground, the weeds and rocks that are coming up through. And we'd like to put in a couple of low rock in pea gravel, basically, to bring the surface up to a workable level. And we're getting a quotation on supplying that material. And while we were talking about that, we also, since we were talking about supplying rocks, that we also talked about the fire department got a requirement for some pea gravel as well. And maybe we can look at this as one combined purchase.
Councillor Barrett, there was some talk about, and I know you got a note here about the Dodge Park.
Yeah.
but there was some talk that we would be able to recoup some of the gravel on the dog park and repurpose it for the facility that the fire department has, on Gatos Lane.
Yeah.
Is that still the plan or?
Not really, because what's happened is that material is in the dog park now. With the weather, with the freeze, the cold, the rain, everything, that stuff is sank down into the mud.
Okay,
And we're gonna dig it up, we're gonna be scraping off the mud surface as
Okay.
well and taking that, that's not what they want.
okay.
They don't want dirty gravel.
I understand that that was the.
That was the
plan.
intention,
Okay,
and what we're getting now is an estimate on what would it cost
okay,
to put a cover over the dog, a ground cover, don't understand what I'm saying. So as the dogs are not in there walking on all these sharp cuts.
Are we
So you
gonna be
mean
able
like
to-
covering with sod?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Or
yeah,
if
if you
you
could sod the area, you would have had to do a lot of prep for it,
Yeah,
it would be a
sure.
lot cheaper,
so
if it were.
It tops over the side. Just go way over that.
yeah, and covered up over that, and then maybe the dogs won't be rebelling anymore, and they'll actually go and use the park. So, that we're, wherever, that's really what's going on.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
The other thing in terms of playground is we were talking about some special needs.
Yes.
We're getting an estimate on what it's going to cost to put that in there. We have some funds in the budget already for that purpose. So as soon as we get the figures, we'll bring that back to council.
Are we looking at having our town manager, CAO, investigate any sources of funding that's applied? Because I know that was something we talked about.
Yeah.
Because I believe somebody had indicated in one of our earlier meetings that there appear to be a lot of sources of funding. I mean, they just need to jump through the hoops and find the right ones.
There are a lot of sources of funding. We'll certainly investigate that before we spend any money.
Yep.
And the town equipment itself, we have a loader up at the salt shed that nobody should turn the key on again, as far as I'm concerned, from listening to what the boys were talking about. It's really not safe to use. Things should be parked or disposed of.
Have we
and
gotten a,
replaced.
have we gotten a third party opinion on that?
I haven't.
I'm wondering if there's any merit to that, because then you get somebody who's gonna come in and have a look at it and tell us whether or not the thing is serviceable in any way, objectively. And if it's not, then we need to take some action on it.
Anytime we're gonna get rid of it, what kind of a price can we pay?
And if
I've already
If it-
started the ball rolling.
it can be fixed up, maybe that can happen too.
Town manager has started to do some work and he's talked to the equipment supplier.
Okay.
Actually, about see what may be available. We don't need a new unit. What may be available out there and at what price.
Yeah.
I think there's discussion of probably getting a new loader and sending that, but the one we have here, up there. To the salt shed,
And that's a good idea, actually.
Have we investigated whether we actually need a second loader? Or would it be more, I would be interested in having the town look at whether it would be more economical if we had a contract with somebody on a per hour basis that was readily available to actually do the bit of loading that we need to do in that salt shed, and investigate whether or not that's more economical for the town than actually owning, maintaining and servicing a new second piece of equipment. Does that make any sense to
It might be
anybody?
more economical, but then it's availability as well. too.
Yeah, exactly.
But we have a loader.
Yeah, that'd be a call.
We have a loader that we use on our own, the big loader that we use for the farm. So it's not like I'm saying that we don't need a loader. I'm wondering if anybody's looked at the feasibility of whether or not we need a second loader just to have in the salt shed. That makes sense?
No, and would we be able to get somebody when we need it? Would be-
Yeah.
That would be my only
I
concern.
don't want to be plowing snow in a snowstorm and we need salt and sand at the same time. Then it might pose a problem. Right now, how often that would occur, who knows? But things to consider, and it's a good point.
I'm not saying it is more economical, but I wouldn't mind if we had a look at that,
Certainly, I
to see
will.
whether we act,
Definitely.
because we're not talking cheap pieces of machinery.
No.
We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars for a piece of
Yeah.
machinery.
It was my understanding, the first part of your report there that the old one that we have now, we would take it and see how feasible it is to take that one and put it against another piece of equipment to put back into the salt shed.
If it's feasible.
Yeah.
From what they're telling me about the operation of that machine, I don't know who wants to buy it first, other than for parts.
Well, the contractor I've been talking to in terms of used equipment and stuff, they're interested in anything in any shape, or form. So he says, you know, when you arrive at a juncture where you want to do something, he says, you can talk. So
All has value.
it all has value.
The other one is that we have a proposal out there now that's down for maintenance again, estimated repair prices of about $5,000. And I mean, at the meeting, everyone was saying, why do we have this machine? It's not doing anything other than sweeping streets. Let's get in a machine to replace that's more versatile, that we can use to sweep the streets, or we can use to pick up a bucket load of gravel, or that we can use on the trail system, maintain the trail system.
And I've already checked into that with the company we purchased Kubota from. The attachments we currently have for that one will be transferable to a Bobcat as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of making a switch, if you will, to a more user-friendly piece of equipment, it would be a little more seamless than starting from scratch. So
But making that switch, when we purchased that piece of equipment, we purchased it based on information that was provided. And that was the piece of equipment.
at that time, yeah.
So now we had it a couple of years and it's down and all of a sudden it's like, well, we need something else. So I don't want to see us purchasing or trading one piece of equipment for another. And then 2 years down the road again, they're saying, well, that's not what we need,
So to say, people advising it.
right? So we need to make sure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, I agree 100%. I agree 100%.
Can I ask the question? I'm not sure we'll go to Earl, Councilor Barrett, or to Guy. We had talked initially, because I think we had a lot of maintenance on the salt truck last year because partly because there was, you know, some issues with the fact that it was left loaded with salt and maybe that's not the best way to do it. And that perhaps it should have been, you know, lubricated and rust proofed and so on to get it ready so that when we need it in the fall, it will be ready. So I'm just wondering if we've taken any action that way.
That's been taken care of, those concerns.
Okay.
Department of Highway always dump theirs and things. They take days to clean up there.
Yeah.
So it's cleaned and rust checked and
Good, good.
That's been done? Okay, that's
perfect.
Great.
Yeah.
And the last issue that came up at the meeting was the French drains around town. They need to be cleaned there.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have a look, see what that's going to cost.
I've got some, I've asked about a quote already about that as well.
What's
So
the
we have, well, we have a couple people couple companies that could do that, right? So we're just gonna put out
I'll request a few quotes. I've requested one formal already, but yeah.
Can I, was it not the case that, was it French drains, that could have been cleaned out by a machine such as our neighbor, Stephenville has the machine? Should we maybe have some conversation to see whether or not they have the capacity to help us out? We don't have a lot of, storm drains and we've been pretty good to them in terms of water and water. Just
For bottles.
I'm just asking.
Win-win. Well, you know, it's a fair,
I'm just asking whether or not,
Fair question.
because we don't need a piece of machinery, we don't need to pay a lot of money to do it. I'm just wondering whether they would have the capacity to do that for us and on our behalf.
I'd be happy to check it out.
Yep.
I just didn't know they had a machine capable of doing.
That's what
They had to go to contractors.
Just a food for thought,
Yeah.
Well,
Good idea.
instruct our CIO to make contact with them and.
You can have a check to call in and see.
Consider it done.
Okay, before we, thank you, Councilor Barrett. I'm assuming you were finished?
Yep.
Thank you. Before we move on, our email system.
Yes, I can speak to that, Mayor Ellsworthy. Myself and the CEO have been actively engaged in the last number of weeks. Looking at alternatives to what we have in place right now, and we're happy to say, we have narrowed it down to a system that we think will be a good replacement at some point for what we're currently using. And hopefully we'll be able to alleviate some of the issues that people are having in terms of getting a hold of us, us receiving emails that have been sent and never show up in our inbox, or vice versa, mail that's been sent out and not received by the general public. So we think we're fairly close to having a solution at hand. We'll have more after Friday, I believe, tomorrow. Yeah, we're gonna be talking to a group. And it's a fairly comprehensive system and it is enterprise level. So there's a whole host of items that come with it other than just the email. That'll be very useful for all the employees in the town and counselors. A lot of collaborative pieces built into it. So more on that later, but there is a solution at hand and hopefully we'll be able to have that in place sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. One other thing, I'd just like to kind of remind the general public that our playground area is not for animals. And I've been noticing people going over there with a lot of animals. So I'd just like to remind them that it's not for animals. And if you happen to be walking through there to take apart the trail, your dog or whatever, it should be on a leash. It should be tethered. There should be no unleashed animals in the community. So I'm just asking them to please respect that because it's used by our kids. It's used during the summer for all the summer rec activities. So we'd like to make sure that area is nice and clean. So please obey the signs where it says no pets allowed. I would appreciate it. Okay, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Next meeting?
Oh, sorry, the next meeting will be July the 13th.
Is there a second of the adjournment?
Yeah, Arrow second the adjournment, didn't you?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Second by Arrow. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.